Welcome back to Halloween Lives, the podcast of Michael Myers. I am your solo host today, Austin Duncan, and I am super thrilled to be back and chatting with you guys. We took a week off. I had finals, I got engaged, and we had technical difficulties. We did try to make last week happen, and I'm sorry that it did not. Blaine would be here today. He's been battling a rough case of hemorrhoids. He honestly couldn't sit down to make the episode. He's been standing for hours straight, and we wish him well. Blaine, thoughts and prayers going out to you. Hope to see you back on the show soon. But for now, my friends, you are stuck with Mr. Austin Duncan, the solo Duncan brother, bringing it to you today. And today we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to do something that, kind of an ongoing series that we've had on this channel. If you want to go check out some of the other videos talking about a similar topic, I will include those in the bio or the info of this video as well. But we're going to be talking about those sequels that never made it to light, the movies that we still haven't seen, and sometimes for good reason. Sometimes it still would have been pretty interesting. So today we're going to be talking about, in an alternate universe of Halloween 8, Blaine's favorite film, a huge fan favorite, Halloween Resurrection. If that film had never dropped, what would we have gotten, or what other ideas were proposed? Now, this article by Collider just dropped here, let's see, April 24th. So still relatively fresh, and it's not a story that's never been reported before, but it is, we are over the halfway point to Halloween. Congratulations, folks. We have made it through the hardest stretch of it. Everything is just going to ramp up from here, and lots of fun Halloween content coming, especially on this channel. Thank you so much to everybody who's been subscribing lately. So lucky to have you on board. And today we are going to be talking about a film. The title of this scrapped film is Halloween 8, Lord of the Dead. And this was a script proposed by Daniel Ferens. Obviously, Daniel Ferens, the writer behind Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Love it or hate it, that is a film that has found its way near and dear to the hearts of Halloween fans. Whether or not it has always been that way is a different story to be told. But regardless, we are talking about an era post 1998, where we had seen Halloween H2O, which had, for lack of better term, kind of rewritten this story. Everything that we had seen from Halloween 4 through 6 was kind of nullified with the Halloween H2O story. For my new to the Halloween friends, or new to the Halloween franchise friends, Halloween H2O negated those three movies and instead went back to Halloween 2, where Laurie Strode figures out she is the sister of Michael Myers, and she has to deal with that emotional situation while having one final confrontation on the same night as the original Halloween with the Shape. Ultimately, she ends up blowing that SOB up using some oxygen or some sort of deadly explosive gas that is just readily available in the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, alongside her, morally and, psychologically not so sound protagonist, Dr. Samuel Loomis, who, obviously we all love and appreciate. But this movie is doing something that, honestly, I think if it doesn't happen here in the era of multiverse, I would be surprised. If this idea of connecting multiple timelines doesn't happen, I might be shocked. We are in the era of every film having a multiversal story, every massive franchise. So maybe Halloween could be no different. That being said, this film isn't trying to open up different parallel universes. It's trying to connect everything in a way that I think is fairly interesting. And, I'm really excited to get into it today. So I'm going to be reading the article and sharing my thoughts with you. If you've heard this proposed sequel, hopefully you enjoy kind of this retelling, as well as, if you haven't heard it, you're in for a ride. This is one that definitely kind of sticks out, and it takes things a different angle. I don't know how the fans would have responded, but please let me know. Kind of treat this episode as if I was telling you about the script for an upcoming movie, and what you would think. Maybe Halloween Ends isn't so bad, or maybe this is exactly what the franchise needed, and we're missing out. So the article is titled, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to give the article away just yet. We'll jump into the first kind of headline here regarding Halloween 6, kind of going back then. So in 2021, Bloody Disgusting sat down with Danielle Ferrens, the writer behind Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. If you need a quick refresher, Curse of Michael Myers is the one where Michael has supposedly been part of a cult his entire life, and that is why he kills. We just covered that a couple episodes back here on this podcast. Obviously, and it has Paul Rudd, it says. In the feature, Ferrens describes the unmade sequel he wrote that would serve as a follow-up to Halloween H2O. It never came to be, and instead we got Halloween Resurrection, but Ferrens remembers it fondly. According to Ferrens, when he showed Mustafa Akkad his script for Curse of Michael Myers, Akkad loved it and said that it was too long and it would need to be broken up into 2. At the time, movies were being greenlit back to back like they are now. So, I think it meant to say they weren't being greenlit back to back the way they are now. So that second part never came to be, but it did sound pretty dang cool. Ferrens' original plan for Curse of Michael Myers' ending saw Kara Strode. He explained this article, by the way, read it really quick. We're lacking a little grammar, so apologies. It's not me having a stroke. It's the writer breaking down mid sentence. He explained that Tommy would find her with her throat slit and the children missing, and the story would take on a sort of Tommy versus Michael angle. But it was the second part of his script that really took things on a different path. Now, we've already covered the let's see what that one was called. It was a different kind of H2O film that was kind of like 2 Michael Myers with one being a magician. You'll find the link to that video below. This is a little bit different than that one. This is a quote from Danielle Ferrens. The second part of the movie, the Halloween 7 treatment that I had inadvertently written, takes place in Haddonfield where the murders are happening. People are a little bit like in Halloween Kills, where people are just kind of engaged in the Halloween stuff. They know something's happened. Then people are locking their doors. There's not a mob, but kind of like that group fear. Then a few of them go out in the night and try to hunt him, and those people start getting killed off. Then what we ultimately would realize is that this coven, this secret society, the Cult of Thorn, was made up of a lot of people within the town of Haddonfield. It wasn't just this group of underground people at the sanitarium. It was almost like a ritual. It was very inspired by Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. I thought if you apply that to a Halloween story of where a family is chosen to be sacrificed, and that this tradition goes back to the early days of Druids and Halloween and the celebration of Samhain, and that was kind of the idea. At the end, you would see that the whole town has come out in a Wicker Man sort of way and has chosen their final sacrifice. End quote. But it didn't stop there. The final moments of Danielle Ferrens' proposed sequel saw Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis, make her comeback. The end of the movie was Jamie Lloyd's life. As Jamie Lloyd's life was about to be taken out by this mob and Michael, and all of a sudden, out of this crowd appears a dark figure. It turns out to be Laurie, and she's there to save her daughter, and that was the end of the film. Interesting, right? So, it all kind of started with that little idea regarding the original ending of Halloween 6. This article goes on to explain that obviously Laurie Strode is kind of the most well-known and most beloved of final girls in horror movies. But this is where things really take a interesting turn. Obviously, we got H2O. And when it came time to do the sequel, things got a little interesting. So the film was going to be called, as I explained, Halloween 8 Lord of the Dead, and would serve as a sequel to Halloween H2O while pulling inspiration from Curse of Michael Myers. As Danielle Farrens quotes, so in my take, I kind of took some of the cues from the original expanded treatment for 6, and I thought, well, there's kind of an interesting idea here, but Michael Myers is clearly dead at the end of Halloween H2O. Spoiler alert, but kind of a spoiler alert for every Halloween film. But they want to keep the franchise going. So I wrote up this very brief take drawing parts of that original Halloween 6/7 treatment that I had written back in the day, and I updated it so that way it would kind of pick up from the events of Halloween H2O, but at the same time also kind of taking it back to where we left off with 6. He was trying to do some damage control, he says. So his idea was like, let's not totally write off what we did. Let's not spend too much time on it, but let's not totally write it off either. He went on to say that his script would begin with a summary of both Halloween 6 and Halloween H2O and would follow Tommy Doyle again. So, Paul Rudd lovers, you're getting your guy back. This time he would be reading through, this is Tommy Doyle, would be reading through Dr. Loomis's old diaries and piecing together parts of Michael's history. The movie would act as a backstory of sorts for Michael's time in the sanitarium, but there was a bigger plot twist in store. So this is where things get really, really, really interesting. And this blurb I'm about to read is directly from Danielle Farrens. He said, the twitch of my pitch was that once all hell breaks loose and the murders began and we see all this mayhem going on with Tommy sort of taking on the role of Loomis, the big finale where they're going to finally unmask Michael Myers and reveal that the killer is actually Laurie Strode. So she's gone completely batshit crazy and come back to relive the murders that she barely survived, and she's become the Shape, Danielle Farrens revealed. In his words, it kind of made sense to me because at the end of Halloween H2O, what you hear after she chops his head off with the axe is that she's breathing heavy, like Michael at the end of the original movie. I thought that was a perfect setup, knowing because they had told me, and this is really interesting, quote, we have Jamie for 5 minutes, that she was contractually obligated to be in the next movie. And I said, well, make them the best 5 minutes. Don't just kill her off in the beginning. Which, as we know, sadly, they did. He said, I thought, if you're going to bring her in again, just don't tell the audience. Make it a big, big surprise. Give it a twist. Put her in at the end. Don't even say she's in it. And then the mask comes off. Laurie's the killer. So I'm going to sit with that for a second because obviously it's an idea that's been toyed with, played with. The ending, the kind of alternate ending of Halloween ends sort of, tips its hat towards this idea that, ultimately the wild things that have happened to Laurie not only make her crazy like we see in a Halloween H2O, like we see in Halloween 2018, but ultimately lead her down the same path as her long lost brother. And ultimately you're questioning sort of, whether or not that has anything to do with the Cult of Thorn, what is going on in relation to that sort of druid curse. And we know it's something family related, but I do want to kind of take just a moment and let that breathe for a second, that the ultimate ending of this Halloween film that was to kind of tie the Halloween H2O story back to Halloween 6 and connect everything, which is crazy as it is, was going to have the ending reveal kind of a Scooby-Doo moment, pull off the mask, and there is Laurie Strode. Obviously, you're dealing with a very conclusive end to Michael Myers. I've spoken on it many times on this show that the way Michael is taken out at the end of Halloween H2O is probably my favorite ending for Michael, even though it was negated in the next film. I think it hits a little bit harder than, say, the trash compactor or whatever, the meat grinder that Michael was thrown in Halloween Ends, even though that too is like a very conclusive ending to Michael Myers. Clearly this dude is not making it through, getting chewed up. We see him without the mask on, which, is kind of points for Halloween Ends. We're murking the right guy. We're not running into the same issue where, Michael might have crushed someone's larynx before switching clothes with a paramedic in what ultimately became a very convoluted start to Halloween 8 or Halloween Resurrection. I do like that Danielle Farron or Daniel Farrens was open to the idea of letting that truly be the end of Michael Myers, and an idea that's been played with since Halloween 4 was the kind of the evil transcending, changing shape, passing on, that we see with the end of Halloween 4 with Jamie Lloyd, stabbing her mother with the scissors in the clown outfit. So, this idea, even theatrically released, has been something that has been teased, and we really haven't seen it. Say what you want about Halloween Ends being, a supernatural curse that Michael passes on to Corey. But I would say even that is up to more interpretation than this, where our protagonist that we've known for several films now, even with her being out in 4, 5, and 6, ultimately Jamie Lee Curtis and Laurie Strode's character is still a present moving figure in those films, even without her being in them. So we're bringing her back after, at this point, the last time we had seen her was 1981 for, a continuation of the original babysitter murders of Michael Myers. So we're bringing her back finally after all this time, through in H2O, where we learn, she is kind of mentally unstable, rightfully so, given the events that have happened to her. She thinks she's put it away. She's ended the evil, but ultimately the evil is back in her. So, it's interesting. We get this great Laurie Strode story in Halloween H2O. It's my favorite way that her story comes up to a wrap, and we get a very, in my opinion, more realistic take on mental illness, with her, not necessarily turning into a Rambo figure, but more so just like somebody that's really trying to move past this, but it keeps rearing its ugly head in her psyche. And ultimately the ending of H2O is sort of supposed to close the gap there. You finally killed Michael Myers. You can breathe, you can relax, you can maybe even celebrate Halloween. You can let John, for God's sake, go to a Halloween party. But regardless, with this Halloween 8, Lord of the Dead, this film that was proposed to Mustafa Akkad, we're kind of negating that story. As interesting as it would be to see that reveal and ultimately see Laurie behind the mask, something that, even though we've got 13 movies, we never saw that, which is surprising in its own right. I think everybody kind of expects in movies. I mean, we're what, 7 Scream films in, and it's like, when is Sydney gonna be taking off that mask too? It's kind of inevitable, right? It is surprising we never really got that twist. And so I will say this, though. What a more effective use of your 5 minutes with Jamie Lee Curtis for this film, rather than what we ended up getting at the start of Halloween Resurrection, with, you know, her still being crazy, her still being sent off to an asylum, and ultimately a shell of the character, that heroic character that we've come to know and love. Just a much better use of the, you know, unfortunately, the 5 minutes Jamie Lee Curtis was willing to give this film. Now, at that time, she had kind of said she was done with it. So maybe the 5 minutes was, a tip of the cap to the thing that kind of got her start in film. And I do believe that 5 minutes, what she was paid, did end up going to charity. So props to her on that. But regardless, you've got Jamie Lee Curtis for 5 minutes of the film. You're going to have her be mostly silent. And then when she finally speaks, she's, you know, talking to Michael, who can't speak back, and ends up giving him a kiss and dying in a really weird way. That felt kind of underwhelming at the start of one of the rougher entries in the Halloween franchise. So, say what you want about Laurie being the killer, how maybe it negates all the character development she got in Halloween 2 and Halloween H2O. But it would have been a more effective, more lasting 5 minutes for the audience than what we ended up getting in the Busta Rhymes Halloween film. So I'll go back to the article. It just kind of wraps things up here. As creative, and maybe it's kind of saying what I said, as creative as an idea as it is to have Laurie become the killer, and as well fleshed out as Farron seemingly had it in his mind, it would have changed the franchise forever, and not necessarily in a good way. Shaking things up and doing the unexpected can be quite good for a franchise. Halloween certainly could have benefited from some fresh ideas, and it since has. But making Laurie take on the role of the Shape might be a little too far. The biggest issue lies in the motive behind Laurie's transformation. Having her go, and this is an interesting line, having her go crazy diminishes everything about her character. She spent the entire franchise listening to people tell her she's crazy and paranoid. No one listened to her until it was too late, and she was nearly knocking on death's door. Having her succumb to those hurtful perceptions and become like Michael would have stripped away everything fans love about the character. We want to see her fight Michael and finally take him down, not become him. There's no denying that she would still be a total badass. Her arc had her arc gone down that route, but it's for the best that it didn't. I think that line, you know, obviously this is the writer kind of inputting his or her perception of this story into this article, but it is interesting kind of, and I agree that it does kind of negate and diminish everything about her character to have her go crazy, which, therein lies a lot of my problems with Halloween 2018 and just the way that direction was taken. That being said, you know, what does it mean for Laurie to be the person behind the mask, and how would that have changed? How would it have gone over with fans like you and I? Personally, you know, it would have been probably a fairly similar reaction to what we got in Halloween Ends, maybe even more drastic. I think for the same reason that I initially was as bought in, and I found my own reasoning for being more bought into Halloween Ends. And yes, this is Halloween Lives, the podcast of Halloween Ends, where we talk about Halloween Ends every single episode. But this one certainly has its ties to that film. What I was getting at was my initial thoughts on that film was like, wow, they really took it a different route. They did something that wasn't necessarily what I was expecting. It wasn't kind of your classic Halloween film. It gave it its own sort of twist. For that same reason, I could see somebody like Blaine and myself going to the theater and appreciating Halloween. I keep on forgetting the name of this, Lord of the Dead, as something that holds its own as a film, just due to the fact that it's not the same film that we've seen now 7 times, or 6 with Halloween 3, Curse of the Witch, or Season of the Witch. It really is. With that being said, it really is a risky idea to flirt with. But the one sort of example we have of that previously was Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, where things didn't necessarily go over so well, not having truly Michael Myers in that film. And this one would be even more like say what you want about Halloween Ends. Michael is in that film, despite what many critics of that film might say. He is a driving factor in the film, even if he is not himself doing much of the action, similarly to Jamie Lee Curtis or Laurie Strode in the Thorn trilogy. But this film would truly be no Michael Myers. You're kind of really sold that Michael has returned, come back in this film, only for it to be Laurie Strode at the end of it, which is kind of a twist in a twist, and seeing a very beloved heroic character turn to the dark side. Ultimately, I don't think this would have gone over well with the fans. I don't know if that then would have still killed the franchise like Halloween Resurrection did. I mean, maybe this franchise was doomed at 8 films to kind of go back to formula with the Rob Zombie remake. But it is interesting to think the possibility of a Halloween 9 where from the jump we know Laurie Strode is the killer. I don't know how excited I would be for that, just because a lot of that mystery that we talk so often about regarding Michael, and his motive for doing what he's doing, because that element would be removed, and you've just got Laurie Strode kind of serving as the Jason Voorhees to Pamela Voorhees, where they're kind of picking up where the last killer left off. While it worked for Jason, I'm not so sure it would have worked for Laurie Strode. And please let me know in the comments if that idea, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a lot of you would have liked to see Laurie take on the mantle of the Shape at some point in this franchise. But I do have to say it would be much less interesting to me to have Laurie be the one that's, this supernatural nearly figure, even with the ability to be supernatural through the Curse of Thorn. But yeah, it is a very interesting twist. Whether or not it would have turned out well is up to you guys. I'm going to lean in the side that it probably wouldn't have ended up the best, and we might have still gotten Rob Zombie's remake there in 2007, regardless of the outcome of whether they went with the Brad Lurie helmed Michael Myers that we see in Halloween Resurrection, or the Jamie Lee Curtis helmed Michael Myers, or the Shape that we see in Halloween Lord of the Dead. Regardless, I do want to get back to sort of that multiversal or connection of the different timelines. I think to a degree, this film would have made it a lot easier for us Halloween nuts to maybe show some of our friends that aren't so big into the Halloween series, that this is one cohesive story. Definitely would have been an interesting thought. And like I said earlier, kind of at the start of the episode, I think we are at some point in time going to see some connective tissue between the various timelines, whether it be sort of a multiversal thing, might be taking it a little bit too aggressive. But however it ends up, I was surprised, and we had talked about it long ago on the show, talking about fan theories that at the end of Halloween Ends, Laurie would wake up in the hospital from the battle in Halloween 2, or I should say Halloween 1978. We see her wake up in the hospital in Halloween 2 in 1981, having sort of dreamed not only the David Gordon Green trilogy, but the previous other timelines as well, all sort of being a part of Laurie Strode's psyche as she was being sort of under the knife, getting treated for her wounds that she sustained in Halloween 1978. That would have probably been the best way to tie all of these franchises together. But at this time, or I should say tie all these timelines together, but at the time of Halloween 8 being released, whether it was Lord of the Dead or Resurrection, we really only had 2 real timelines, with the exception of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, to connect. It was a bold idea for the entire creative team on Halloween H2O to negate 4, 5, and 6, which had, kept the franchise going up until this point. So to then bring it back, tie both of these together, is an idea that honestly I do wish had happened. I wish there was some connective tissue between what is one of my favorite Halloween films, Halloween H2O, and some of the other great films like Halloween 4, and for a lot of fans, Halloween 6. Having that all be in the same timeline, being able to watch those films in one continuous setting and everything making sense would have been great. But ultimately, Halloween H2O kind of serves as its own timeline, tying back to the original 2 films, much in the way that the David Gordon Green trilogy ties back to just the same original film. It's kind of an idea that, like I said, I wish would have been explored with Halloween 8, but ultimately we got a direct sequel to Halloween H2O where we do get Laurie Strode for 5 minutes, but it's at the beginning of the film. She is kind of, like I said, underwhelmingly killed in the very early scene of that film. And, we don't get any sort of large lasting final scene with Laurie, I should say. Even though there is a good music note when Laurie does go down and falls from Michael's arms after giving him a kiss on the latex lips. It's not quite as lasting as a character as large as Laurie Strode deserves. And for that, you look at a film like Halloween Ends, giving her that monologue at the end and doing that character, oh God, here come the comments, doing that character justice. Ultimately, I think that was a better way to have that character go. But this certainly would have been a risky choice, something that we would still be talking about today, probably as one of the worst creative choices in the franchise. At the end of the day, I don't know what fans would have responded to better, whether it be Halloween 8 Resurrection or Halloween 8 Lord of the Dead. And before we drop this topic, I do just want to talk about that title, Lord of the Dead. Kind of a wild name, but it would have been pretty cool to see as, wrapping up Laurie's story in a different way. Whether or not her ultimate transfer to the dark side would have been explained by the Curse of Thorn, or whether it was truly just a psychological damage of going through everything she's gone through up until that point. This article doesn't necessarily dive in. I would prefer it to be just sort of the cult, maybe make that lasting hit of like, okay, this is a really good character, but because of this druid cult that we now understand and have learned about, because of this curse, and there's, outside of John, her son, there are no other lanes for the shape curse to go to, it would make sense, I guess, that of the two remaining Strodes, Laurie was the one to get it. I think maybe that would have been a little bit more impactful than simply she went crazy and she started killing people, even though that's what she's been running from for whatever, 7 films at this point. And it also would have been interesting to see how they would explain off her supposed death that is off screen between Halloween 2 and Halloween 4, because ultimately bringing back Laurie Strode means in the same timeline as Jamie Lloyd means she was kind of a deadbeat mom. Maybe it was for the best of Jamie, we would come to figure out, or whatever. But ultimately, she did let Jamie get into some pretty sticky situations with Uncle Mike, as she would get, stalked and nearly murdered by Michael Myers. You would think Mama Laurie would maybe step in and go a little Rambo Laurie on Michael for such a feat, but they would have to explain that kind of a large story gap there of what Laurie was up to in between 4, 5, and 6, and why she let Jamie fend for herself in those situations. But ultimately, nothing would feel right enough that the Laurie we've come to know and love through 1, 2, and at that time H2O as well, where we really see kind of Mama Bear Laurie taking care of her son John, much like she took care of Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace back on that fateful night in 1978. It would have been interesting to then see that all diminished, if not for some sort of curse that makes that sort of change on a dime more obvious. But it does seem that Daniel Farron seems to suggest that she simply went batshit crazy after the events of Halloween H2O. Not sure how I feel about that. You guys will have to let me know how you feel about that as well. And just how Laurie being the killer would have affected the legacy of Laurie Strode. Would we have gotten her back to sort of redeem that character in the David Gordon Green trilogy the way we did had something like this happen? Is an interesting thought. This could have put a bad taste in the mouths of fans regarding Laurie Strode for a long, long time, and that push, that ask for Jamie Lee Curtis to return might not have been as strong had the reputation of Laurie Strode been tainted in the way that this film suggests. So that was a lot to cover. Ultimately, Halloween Lord of the Dead did not come out, and probably for good reason, though what it was replaced with, certainly not anything to feel, any sort of excitement that that's what won. But regardless, it is what we got. It did kill the franchise either way, and we ended up getting Rob Zombie helming a remake 4 years later. After the release of Halloween Resurrection. So that is what I'm excited to share with you guys and learn a little bit more of your perspectives on. This article was released recently. I'm always kind of just Googling Michael Myers because I'm a sick freak. Ran across this article in the interim of us being off, and definitely knew that it was something I wanted to cover. And I know Blaine wanted to, but again, huge, massive, repulsive hemorrhoids are keeping him from sitting and doing the show with me. Ultimately, he will be back. The Duncan Brothers will return. And just real quick, wanted to say thank you to everyone. I know we've had a couple off weeks in our second year of this show, where we have missed an upload, and ultimately people have been super cool with it, super understanding. but it is a weekly podcast. It will always be a weekly podcast. Unfortunately, life has gotten in the way. A couple times this year. We're really happy we had a full year of getting it done. So just want to acknowledge that to the people that, and there's not a ton of you, but there are some that are quite disappointed when we don't have an upload every Friday. That is our goal always. We've only missed it a couple times, and at least we've only missed it without any sort of warning a couple times. But ultimately just want to say we apologize. We're not happy about it either. And, we're always going to try to drop these weekly because it is, our favorite time of the year, our favorite time of the week, I should say, just sitting down and talking about good old Michael Myers, our two favorite things in the world, Halloween and Halloween. But ultimately we missed last week due to several events. But it's all good. And once Blaine gets those bad boys clipped off, he'll be right here, not physically, but video wise next to me, maybe physically. We do have some plans, coming down the pipeline. We're going to be doing some stuff that we haven't, done yet on this show. And, I think there's been some people who enjoy this show that have asked for these things, and we've just been kind of figuring out how we can do them best. But there are a lot of fun plans that we have coming down the pipeline, trying to make sure, even though we're only just barely over halfway to Halloween, that next October is a really fun time for you guys that showing up week in and week out. For us on this podcast. And so that is what I'm going to leave you with tonight, is a good old thank you to everyone who's watching this, listening to this online. Quick reminder on that. The video always comes out a week before the audio. So that way you can come hang out, watch us, for God's sake. We're very vain people. We want you to look at our faces if you want the latest and greatest. But as always, my name is Austin Duncan. I am super pumped to be back. We will be back again next week. Thank you for your grace, letting us be off, take a week off for some technical difficulties, some very exciting things. Sorry, ladies, I don't have a ring yet, but your time is done. No, I'm super happy to be engaged. Super happy that entering to the next stage of my life. But with all those changes, nothing's changing around here. You're going to find us here at Halloween Lives. Check us out on Instagram at halloween.lives.podcast. Give us a look. Shout us out. Say hey. Let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Tell me, what the hell your reaction would have been to an ultimate mask reveal of Laurie Strode as the Shape. I'm not buying it. But ultimately, shout out Danielle Ferrens, clearly a huge fan of this franchise and was trying to take things in a direction that we hadn't seen yet. But thank you so much for watching. I will catch you next time. My name is Austin Duncan. You have a very spooky rest of your day. We will catch you next time.